am from a small town of 3,000 people in East Tennessee. Yes. After I graduated, I traveled a whole 25 miles east to Johnson City, where I attended East Tennessee State University, home of the Fighting Buccaneers. Get bucked up! Well, why don't you get bucked up? We were called the Buccaneers, of course, because of that problem of rogue pirates in the Smoky Mountains. I was your average college student. I worked part-time at the drive-thru at the Burger King. Here you go, here's your sandwich, here's your drink, have a good night. I was studying psychology, and I sang in our 16-member chamber choir. One day, my sophomore year, Dr. Jenrette, our director, said, "We are going to Europe." Our choir had been chosen to travel for 2 weeks in Yugoslavia as guests of the Yugoslavian government. They had opened up their borders, and they had separated themselves from the Russian state. To make the pot even sweeter, we were going to spend 1 day in Venice, Italy, and 1 day in Vienna, Austria. And I, all of a sudden, imagined myself hearing Beethoven in Vienna, a gondola in Venice, and whatever it was you did in Yugoslavia. I decided that I wanted to be sophisticated. I was going to go to Europe. This became my quest. So I said, "What do I have to do, Dr. Jenrette? What do I have to do on this?" And he said, "You have to raise $2,000. Well, this is 1985 in East Tennessee, so I did what every poor college student did. I went straight to my parents. And my stepfather, who was all about independence, said, "You want to go, you find the dough." So I quickly did the math about my part-time job at the Burger King. There was no way. So like Greece, I started an austerity program. I started clipping coupons from the local newspaper so I could get the $2 chicken box at KFC. I started eating at my grandparents', and God forbid I only drank at frat parties. But it wasn't enough. I even returned the new pair of black satin parachute pants with the zippers to the Chess King at the mall. I had just received a credit card in the mail because I was a sophomore. So I had bought them and I took them back to the mall, and when I returned them, they gave me cash. So I started to think. So I went to every department store in the mall and I applied for a credit card. And 5 to 10 business days later, when I received my credit cards, I went back to JCPenney's and I bought a pair of penny loafers. And I went over to the Radio Shack and I bought a new Betamax VCR. And then I went to Sears and Roebuck's and bought me a Black & Decker chainsaw. I drove home in my 1982 Chevy Love truck, waited a couple of days, and then went back and returned everything back to every store for hard-earned cash. Then I took that cash, $1,000, and went to the American Bank and paid off that loan on my Chevy Love truck, and got a personal loan using my title for a lien for $1,700. Let us not forget, I am 19 years old and I've already mastered the financial landscape which led to the prosperity of the 80s and the eventual bankruptcy of Europe. But somehow I am still $300 shy. I have put posters up in my room. I have put pictures up. I have put a big banner that says Belgrade or bust. But I cannot come up with the money. I've sat down and I have done the math. And that night I have to go to choir rehearsal. It's called choir rehearsal, not choir practice, because as Dr. Jenrette would say, athletes practice, artists rehearse. I was late because I didn't want to have to tell him, but when I got there, everyone was abuzz. Foreigners coming to town. Foreigner? The American British rock band? With anthems such as Urgent, Urgent, and Jukebox Hero? They're coming to town, and we're going to sing with them, he says. I am so excited. I completely forget about Belgrade. I completely forget about Yugoslavia. 2 weeks later, there we show up at the Johnson City Freedom Hall Civic Center, and we rehearse with Foreigner. We go through the whole number that we're going to perform with them. And later that night, we are fitted with long, flowing white robes. I must have done really well in rehearsal because they gave me a tambourine. So we sit there backstage and wait because we're the last song of the evening, and they start to play and they're in the chorus, and we're backstage and we're in the wings, and as the music starts to swell towards the chorus, we march out on stage, and I walk downstage to my microphone, and then on cue I'm like, I want to know what love is, and I start singing. And I start swaying in my big robe, and I'm hitting that tambourine, and I'm looking out on the audience, and people are swaying and singing along, and the guitarist comes over, and he does this big solo right beside me, and I'm just giving it all the hip and all the tambourine I have, and I look out over the audience, and I am awestruck. I totally forget about Europe, and we come off stage, and we go out, and we drink, and I spend money, and the next day I'm like, oh my God, what happened? And I go back to choir rehearsal, and I'm prepared. I go early to tell Dr. Jenrette that no way now I can go to Europe. And he's like, don't you understand? The Foreigner gig paid. It paid enough that all of us can fly from New York to Belgrade and back. It paid $500 per person. Now I have $300 extra for my trip. So I go to Europe, and I go to Vienna, and I see an opera, and I go to St. Mark's Square, and I sip espresso. But I go to Yugoslavia, and I go to Dubrovnik, and I swim in the Adriatic Sea, and I go to Mostar and cross that famous bridge. I go to Split and see the Colosseums and the ruins from the Romans. I go to Sarajevo, and I see the stadium that was demolished 10 years later during the war. I see things that don't exist any longer. And I come back to the United States to this mountain of debt for things I don't even own. There's this $250 for a pair of Sebago black penny loafers. A Black & Decker chainsaw, $350. A country boy who got to see the world, priceless.